unhelpful thought patterns and how to cope up with or how to reconstruct or restructure our thought patterns to help us move forward more in a more better way. So I would like to welcome all of you to this webinar. We know that this webinar is entirely or solely conducted for the partner staff, mainly directors, coordinators, and all staff members of Childline from South Zone as well as from East Zone. I know that a few participants from North and West also have joined who are very comfortable with English language. They also might have joined. I welcome all of you, sir, especially the directors and the coordinators. Let us think that this is going to be a very helpful one. Also, let us welcome the resource persons of today from Alternative Story Bengaluru. We have very well experienced hands, two of them today leading the session. One is, we know already, Diksha Bala, who is a very resourceful person in this subject, as well as we have Sriya Narayan, who both are from Alternative Story, who will be leading this session forward. And we know that this webinar, a series of webinar is taking place, and this is the fifth of its kind, and there are many to come at also. And all these webinars and all this is happening because of the great support that we CHILDLINE India Foundation has received from HCL Foundation. They have funded for this program. So I thank them also, and also welcome if any of their representatives are joining this webinar. I would also like to welcome all CHILDLINE India Foundation staff, especially in the senior management team, regional heads, as well as CICs from various zones. I also welcome my colleagues from CKH, CHILDLINE Knowledge Hub, Mr. Pratik, Abhay, Nida, Vajanti, Surya, and our beloved Harley ma'am as well to this webinar. Let me take you to the context of this webinar. We know that what is unhelpful thought patterns? Have you ever thought of, do you have, or do I have unhelpful thought patterns? Take a second and think that which are your unwanted thought patterns. You know, this can be helpful for ourselves as well as for helping children also, because now many times when we come across children who have this kind of unhelpful thought patterns, sometimes, you know, sometimes children may think, children have a lot of thinkings which are wanted and unwanted. Sometimes a child may think all of her friends has gone for one of their friends' birthday party, but she was not invited or she was not able to go. But she will take on herself that, you know, she may think that I am hated by other people, or I am hated by my friends. So solely I was not invited to this birthday party. So like that, there are many kind of a thinking or thought process going on in our mind, which can have a damaging effect if it goes on a chronic basis. It can be, you know, it can come and go, but you know, for some people, for some children, this can be a chronic thought process, which can have a hampering impact on the children as well as ourselves. If we ourselves having a unwanted thought patterns for a long period, it can have a damaging effect on ourselves. It will reflect on our personality, our kind of a relationship with others, and you know, it will reflect in every sphere of your life, and it will damage ourselves at the end. In order to identify them that I'm having this kind of unwanted thought process and I want to get rid of it. You know, there are techniques which have been developed by leading psychologists in this field. And this is what going to in this 2-hour session. You know, the resource person from Alternative Stories, they are going to help us identify and to, you know, modify the unwanted thought patterns. It may take a couple of, you know, it will take a really a long time to really come out of it, but it's a gradual and steady process. All of a sudden we can't come out of the unwanted thought processes or patterns. It will take time. So that you need to give your time, you need to dedicate your time to understand, and I have this problem, so I want to come out of it. If you think, then only, if you believe that I have this problem, then only you will be able to resource persons of today, Diksha Bala and Sriya Narayan, to take forward this session. And I wish them all the best, and I wish all the participants to benefit out of this webinar to the maximum. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Anthony. I think that was a very comprehensive introduction and sort of very close to what I am going to say in the introduction. But firstly, I want to hear from you. There are about 121 of us in today's webinar, right? So I want to hear how you've been, how's it going. Let's do it this way. There is a chat option in the toolbar, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Tell me how you're feeling. 1 being not so great and 10 being great. How are you feeling right now? You can put your responses in the chat. You can send it directly to me. If you're not comfortable sending it to everybody, you can send it to just me, um, or you can send it to everyone, right? But let's start with this, with you telling me how you are feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. All right, so we see a couple of responses. Let's keep them coming. Think about it, right? Spend a minute and close your eyes and think about how you're feeling right now. The reason I'm starting with this question is because whether we've realized it or not, the reason why we're here in this webinar today is our well being, right? That is the intention behind today's talk. So, by starting out and thinking about how you're feeling right now, you're making a commitment. You're saying that, okay, I'm here right now, this is how I'm feeling right now, which may also mean that I am willing to do something to feel better, right? So all right, let's look at some of the responses. We have, understandably, several responses, right? We have from 10, 9, 7, 8 to even 5 and even a 1, right? So whoever you are and however you may be feeling, let's just say that we're all welcome here, right? And we're all united, we're all together in the fact that we want to feel better, right? That's the universal thing, that we always want to feel better. So let me start by saying who this webinar is for, right? What is an unhelpful thought? An unhelpful thought is basically anything that holds us back, right? That makes us feel like we're not good enough, that makes us feel like we don't deserve good things, that makes us feel like we're not lovable, or we're not talented, or we're not good at what we do. An unhelpful thought is basically something that limits us, right? And we all have these thought patterns, right? So if we want to get something out of today's talk, what is important is that we sit and think about, what kind of negative thoughts do I have? What kind of negative thoughts do I have? For example, let me read out some for you, so that it's easier to think about what a negative thought, after all, is. I said some of this right now, but I'm not talented, right? Or I always make mistakes. I always make silly mistakes. Or I never do a good job. I never live up to my potential. Um, why will anybody love me? Right? I'm not nice to look at. I'm not a good person. Why will anybody love me? I'm so average, I'm ugly, or I don't deserve good things, right? These are examples of negative thoughts, right? Now, if you are comfortable doing so, you can do this. But tell me, in what area do you experience these negative thoughts, right? Is it related to work? Is it related to, let's say, your personal life? Is it related to friends? Is it related to, let's say, a romantic partner, uh, one spouse, maybe, right? But where do we experience these negative thoughts, these negative thought patterns, right? And I'll tell you why I'm asking you to think about this. It's because when I give these examples during the talk, it's going to be easier to relate to. That's number one. Number two is, if you tell me what area you are experiencing a negative thought, if you are experiencing something that is making you sad, if you're experiencing something that's making you feel put down or disappointed, right? Then that'll help me give the right examples for you during the course of this talk, right? That is the reason why I'm asking you to think about it. So what have I told you until now? I've told you about the fact that we're all in this to feel better about ourselves, to take care of ourselves a little better. And I've told you about the fact that an unhelpful thought pattern is basically something that limits us, something that brings us down, something that doesn't let us live to our potential, right? And uh, that we all experience negative thoughts, and it's important to think about um, in what area the negative thoughts are really strong, right? Or let's say any kind of a negative thought that is very strong in your life. At any point in the talk today, if you think about this negative thought that you want to address openly, feel free to unmute yourselves, and I'll feel very happy to speak to you one on one. Or you can even type in your message chat, send it privately to me, and we can take it from there, right? So why are we speaking about thoughts? Yeah. Can we move to the next slide, please? All right, great, thank you. So why are we talking about thoughts today? Um, let's say when you're feeling down or when you're feeling upset or sad, what do you usually do? Can I hear from you?
ఇప్పుడు
You,
సేమియా
if there is a problem with the mic, you can type out your response. But okay, let me rephrase the question. My question was, when you're not feeling so good, when you're feeling down, when you're feeling disappointed, what do you do to help yourself in that moment, right?
Diksha, Suresh has said that he will listen to music.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good response. Anybody else? I'm sure a lot of us listen to music over here. Anybody else have another response? I can see people have raised their hands. So if I mean, feel free to unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, what I do is, Diksha, I watch some comedy programs, comedy shows, and things like that.
Okay, okay, okay. That's amazing. All right. Anybody else? I've seen. I can see that Vivo 1811 has raised their
Hello,
hand.
hello.
Yes.
Madam, when I get upset or mood off, I watch a cartoon.
You watch cartoons. Okay,
Mm.
great. Sort of takes us back to our childhood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Anybody else have a
Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
Music is good, but one more thing is meditation. Whenever we are getting tension or anything, just
Yes.
take breathe and take meditation. It will just give a good result to me.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Definitely. If meditation works for you, then that's amazing, right? Um, all right. Call a close friend and went out as well, right? So if you see, all of us have ways to make ourselves feel better, right? And everything that we've said has mostly been a behavior, it's been an action, right? To call a friend is an action, to listen to songs is an action, to listen to to watch cartoons or to watch a comedy show is an action, to meditate is an action, right? So when we are trying to make ourselves feel better, what we know or what is easy, relatively easy in that situation, is to act a certain way, right? To do something in order to make ourselves feel better, right? Now, in today's talk, what we are going to focus on is the fact that yes, we have the actions, we know what to do to make ourselves feel better. But in today's talk, we are going to focus on the thoughts, right? So here I am sitting and telling you that thoughts play a really important role when it comes to feeling good, right? And I'll explain this a little bit more, keeping in mind the second point that's on your screen right now. There is an interaction between various things that determines how we're feeling right now, right? Think about the response you gave me in the beginning of this talk. Somebody said they're feeling 5 on 10, somebody said they're feeling 9 on 10, 10 on 10, even a 1 on 10, right? So whatever your response is, think about it in relation to this point. Why are you feeling a 1 on 10? Why are you feeling a 10 on 10? Why are you feeling a 7 on 10? It is because of a combination of various factors, right? For example, your environment. Let's say the weather, right? If it's too chilly, or if you've been sweating, or you had to walk a lot this morning, or it was an inconvenient start to your day, then it's likely that your environment itself has been a little inconvenient, it has been a little stressful, right? And then there is a combination of your emotion. Let's say you're irritated or frustrated because of the weather, because of the environment, right? And therefore what happens is that you're feeling lazy, you're feeling lethargic, you feel like sitting down, not doing anything, not even listening to this webinar so much, right? That is your physiology, where you're feeling where you're feeling lazy, where you're feeling bored, or you're feeling tired, right? That is your physiology. And therefore, when you're feeling tired, what do? The behavior or the action will be, let's say, to daydream. It'll be, let's say, to scroll through social media on the phone. And the resultant thought will be, let's say, I don't want to listen to this, right? This is boring, or this is not important, or how will it help me, right? It's just a waste of time, right? So in a way, if you are thinking something right now, if you are feeling something right now, it is a
Arun,
combination. It,
ஓப்பன் ஆகுது ஆனா சவுண்ட் வர மாட்டேங்குதே ஆடியோ.
Thank you. So it is a combination of what has happened in the environment, emotionally what is happening, physiologically in your body, physically what is happening, and the resultant behaviors and thoughts, right? So let's think about the fact that we can change the way we feel by the actions we do, right? For example, you told me yourself that you listen to music, you watch comedy shows, you meditate, and so on. So when you change the behavior, it changes the feeling, right? In today's
Mute my audio.
change the thoughts. When you change the thoughts, it
I
also,
better start video.
I'm just going to pause for a second just to ask you to please mute yourself if you're not talking to us in the talk. Um, give you a minute to do that. I don't think it's done yet. Okay, all right. Okay, I can't hear anything, so let me just go ahead. Right. So, like I was saying, let's take the time when you were feeling down, right? Maybe there was an argument with a friend, right? So, what happens in that case is that, let's say you don't eat, right? And therefore, you feel very low on energy. You don't want to talk to anybody else. Therefore, there is no opportunity to make yourself feel better. Maybe behaviorally, you lock yourself up in the room, you don't eat, you don't talk to anybody else, and therefore the thoughts are that, let's say, nobody likes me, or it won't matter whether I'm here or not. Nobody is going to miss me if I'm not here, right? So therefore, you see that at any point when you're feeling down, when you're feeling low, you have a high pressure job, right? All of us here have high pressure jobs. So when you realize that you're feeling down, when you're feeling low, when you're not able to function normally, it is a combination of various things. It is a combination of physically how you're feeling, it is a combination of what you're doing, it is a combination of what you're thinking at that point, and as well as your environment, what's happening around you, right? And one tip is the fact that if you have, I saw some of you writing down notes. So this is something that I would ask you to put down, right? Put down the words environment, emotion, physiology, or physical health. Put down behaviors and thoughts, right? The next time you're feeling low, do a cross check of all of this. What is happening around me? What am I feeling emotionally? How is my body? How's my physical health feeling? What am I doing right now that I'm feeling low, right? How am I thinking about this situation? Right? So when you go through all of these points one by one, you have all of these chances to change something, right? Change something in the environment, change something about your physical health, change something about what you're doing, and finally our focus for this talk, change something about how you're thinking, right? Now the thinking, like Mr. Anthony said in the beginning, it's not very easy. Yeah. It may seem easy when I'm speaking about it, but it's not as easy. So, therefore, what we've decided to do today is the fact that I will give you an introduction about the importance of thoughts, and how to know that changing your thoughts will help you, right? And then my colleague Diksha is going to take you through what are some of the negative thoughts, right? And how do you identify negative thoughts? How do you change negative thoughts? And towards the end, I will come back and I will take you through a small meditation passage. Okay, so that is our agenda for the day. Now, like I said, um, I hope it's clear that we can make ourselves feel better by changing any of the things that are shown on your screen right now. But in today's talk, we will be specifically speaking about the thoughts, right? Um, okay, all right, okay. So now, I think I see a message saying, except money matters, I think I'm always positive. That's great. That's great. That's great. Maybe we can even speak a little more in detail about what makes us negative, what gives us negative thoughts about money, right? We'll deal with that when and if you're comfortable sharing. So for now, let's speak about why are we focusing on thoughts, right? It's as important as, let's say, the actions or changing the physical health, changing your environment is as important as that. But why are we focusing on speaking about this today? I'll explain this with a small story, right? Let me explain this with a small story. This is a story about somebody, a psychologist, actually, a psychoanalyst, whose name is Viktor Frankl, right? So this person was a doctor, was a psychologist, was a psychoanalyst, and he was also a Jew during the Holocaust, right? I mean, he was a Jew, and he lived during the time of the Holocaust, um, which means to say that he went through a lot of difficulties in his lifetime, right? From being imprisoned in a concentration camp to his mother and his wife dying in the concentration camps itself. He went through a very troublesome period in his life, right? Where so many things are questioned. When you're imprisoned, when you go through abuse in the way that you do, when you have very meager meals, you don't even have enough to eat, right? From being a doctor, from being at that place in society, to coming down to such a place where you don't have enough food, where you have to work from the morning till the night, it is extremely difficult, and it can challenge anybody's thoughts, right? This man, having learned so much in his lifetime, came out of the concentration camps to write books, to develop theories that are still very, very, very relevant in psychology. So what does he say determines all of this? He says that what determines, let's say, meaning in life or success in life is the fact that you can change or you can take away anything from a human being's life, right? You can take away anything from a human being's life except their attitude to respond, right? Their attitude to respond to anything. Think of it in your own life, in your own family, right? Let's say when a family problem comes, right, when there is less money, I'm going with this example because I heard about it. When there is less money in the house, when it becomes difficult to earn, when the requirements of the house are a lot more than the money coming in, right? In such a situation, different people in the family have different thoughts, right? One person is probably likely going to be more negative, one person is probably going to be more positive, one person is going to be more hopeful, one person is going to be more demotivated, right? That's how we are as human beings. We all come in with different attitudes and thoughts, right? So this person is saying, Viktor Frankl is saying, that no matter what the difficulty is, no matter how difficult the situation is, you still have one freedom, which is the way you think and the way you respond to situations, right? So, um, that is why we're speaking about thoughts, right? Because it is really one of the last freedoms that we have as human beings. In the coronavirus pandemic, you saw that so many things are out of our control, right? But ultimately, you realize that there is this one thing, the way you think about a situation, right? The kind of attitude you bring to a situation, that is always yours. Nobody can take that away from you, right? Which is why I'm saying that thoughts are something that we can rely on. Thoughts are something that we can turn back to when times are difficult. Because it's always ours. It's our thoughts, and nobody can change that. Nobody can take it away from you, right? How much I've said until now is that, does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. If I'm going too slowly or fast, please let me know. All right. Okay, so that is the reason why we're speaking about the thoughts. Now, the next
No,
thing I would,
you at the pace, I think.
sorry, hello,
Yeah, you are at the right space.
I'm at the
Your
right.
speed is right. Yeah.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. So that is one point that I want you to take away from this, right? It's a very empowering, it's a very powerful thought if you think about it, right? If you think about the fact that life can throw anything at me, but my thing, my right is mine, my thoughts are mine, right? And therefore, I can think about what I want to do. I may not have access to comedy shows, I may not have access to cartoons, I may not have access to music, but my thoughts are mine, so I have access to them, which is why we are concentrating on the thoughts, despite the fact, like I said, we can change anything and make ourselves feel better, but our thoughts are ultimately ours. So therefore, it is easy access, and it is one of the last of our freedoms, and that's why we're concentrating on that today. Now, I also want to tell you about a very interesting model called the ABC model, and it sort of sums up what we have been speaking about. I'll take the example of a child itself because we are so familiar with what children go through. I'll give you two situations, right? In the first situation, the child has spoken to a teacher, and the teacher has told the child that, looking at the child's notebook and seeing that there are so many errors, the child has not completed his or her work, the teacher says that you are useless, right? Don't study, you're useless. How much ever somebody tells you, you never understand things. Yeah. um, and in this scenario, I want to say that there is an A, there is a B, and there is a C. What is the A? The A is the activating event, okay, which is this, what I explained to you. Now, B is a belief. whatever the child thinks, whatever the child believes, whatever the child um, reasons after the teacher says is the belief, right? And C is the consequence. So A is activating event, B is a belief, and C is the consequence, right? So let's come back to the example. So the teacher has told the child that you are useless, you can't do anything right. How much ever somebody tells you, you don't understand, right? And tell me if this is right or wrong, but we have different kind of reactions from children, right? One child may start crying, one child may get very angry, one child may, let's say, may, let's say, ask a question back, right, saying like, what can I do better, or where did I go wrong, or something like that. So the different kinds of reactions can be many, right, which is the C, which is the consequence, right? So it is safe to say that an activating event does not lead to a consequence. Just because the teacher said this, you did not cry. Just because the teacher said this, you did not um, uh, take it in your stride, right? There is something else that is happening between an activating event and the consequence, which is the B, which is the belief. So how I look at an event will determine the consequence of it, right? So let's say in the first scenario, the child thought that whatever I do, nobody is ever happy with me, right? I am useless. I've heard this so many times. I am useless, and therefore, um, I can never get anything right, right? And when the child believes this, it leads to the consequence of, let's say, crying, or let's say anger, walking out of the room, or throwing the book, or um, crying. Yeah. So that is the first scenario. But in the second scenario, let's say the child thinks, the teacher seems very angry right now, and it could be because of the fact that many of us have not done our homework. So what can I do to feel to not repeat this, right? When that is the belief, the consequence is, let's say, feeling hopeful, or feeling motivated, wanting to do better, thinking about what can be done better, right? So what I am saying is, while you are dealing with your high pressure job, while you are taking calls, while you are listening to very upsetting stories that are happening with children, that is your activating event, right? And the consequence of that is, let's say, feeling motivated, feeling hopeful, wanting to do better, wanting to be there. But the consequence can also be sometimes feeling low, feeling angry with the world, feeling agitated, feeling frustrated, right? That can also be the consequence, right? And what determines what consequence it will be is your belief. Are you seeing the fact that you are helping people? Are you seeing the fact that people have benefited from just talking to you, from just you being there, right? Or are you seeing the fact that it is your responsibility to solve every child's problem in the world, right? That makes sense. So what I'm saying is, when you're low, when you're upset, when you're sad, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're feeling anything that is uncomfortable, it's not happened because of the event. It happened because of the way you think about the event, right? So just by changing that belief or changing that thought, A does not equal to C. Does that make sense? You will not you can change your emotions, you can change your reaction to an activating event just by changing the belief, the way you think about the activating event. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. I didn't hear much, so just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna try and say that in simpler words. A is um, anything, any event, anything that causes disturbance. Okay. B is your belief, and C is the consequence. Usually, we are very worried about C. When we see a child crying or when we see somebody upset, that is the consequence, right? So that is the consequence. But what I am trying to say is that's not the only thing we should focus on. We should go a few steps back and see that, yeah, fine, the person is crying, but why is the person crying? They have a certain belief, they have certain thoughts about the event. That is why they are crying. That is why the child is upset. That is why I am feeling tired at the end of the day. Right? For example, let's say somebody believes that they've got calls after calls today, right? And they feel like they should, an employee, let's say Childline, working for Childline itself, they feel like we have to be there for children. That is our main responsibility. And if we are not there for children, that means we're not doing a good job, right? We have to be there for each person. And therefore I'm not doing my personal things. I'm extending my work line. I'm working even when I'm not feeling well, right? So when that is the belief, the consequence will be feeling tired, feeling let's say down the line even frustrated, right? So what I am saying is when you're feeling low about anything, right, it's important to go back a few steps and think about your belief. What did you think about the situation that made you upset, right? It's not just the situation, it's your belief about the situation, it's your thoughts about the situation. Yeah. Now, having said that, let's move on to the next slide. All right. So, there are different kinds of thoughts that are there, and this is a very interesting concept. So, I want you to pay attention to this. Now, you see, now this is the kind of talk that you can't just listen. It's very personal, so you have to feel it. You can't just listen to it, right? So, think about it in context to your own life, in context to your examples. Negative automatic thought is something that happens because of a situation. So let's say a very distressing child calls in, right? And you hear a very distressing story about what is happening to a child. The first negative automatic thought is, this is a tough case. I won't be able to help. How can I help? I'm sitting so far away. Will I be able to do, I won't be able to do justice, right? That is the negative automatic thought. It's automatic, it happens right then. Whenever it is a tough situation, the thought just pops up, right? And it's negative because, like I said, it's unhelpful, right? It stops you, it limits you, it makes you feel low, it makes you feel like you cannot help. So these negative automatic thoughts are very quick and we are aware of them. They are in our awareness, right? So all 133 of us, there are 133 of us right now. So all of us, if we think about it, let's say in our marriage, in our romantic life, in our social life, in our personal development, in our work life, we all constantly experience negative automatic thoughts, right? And these negative automatic thoughts are very connected to the underlying rules and, right, the underlying rules and assumptions of our life. For example, let's say in context to the difficult call that you got today from a child, my underlying rule or assumption can be that if I do not help this child, if this child is not smiling or relaxed by the end of today's call, that means I have not done a good job, right? The child should be relaxed, the child should smile at the end of our call. Only then does that determine that I have done my job. That is the underlying rule, that is the underlying assumption. So So the negative thought was that, the negative automatic thought was that this is a tough case, I'm not going to be able to help. The underlying rule in our mind is the fact that if the child does not sound relaxed, it means that I've not done a good job, right? And therefore the core belief, which is lower, core belief is more hard to find. Negative automatic thought, it's right there, we know what the thought is, right? Underlying rules or assumptions, if I sit and I talk to you for some time and I ask you a few questions, maybe I'd be able to understand what your underlying rule or assumption is, why you getting negative thoughts. But the core belief is a little deeper than that. The core belief is deeper than the rules and assumptions, it's deeper than the automatic thoughts. The core belief, let's say in this situation, is the fact that I am worthless if I don't have a job. I am good for nothing if I'm not good at my job. My job is the only good thing about me, right? Just as examples, right? Or let's say a core belief could be the fact that um, I'm useless if I'm not of help to somebody. Yeah. So I'm useless, I'm worthless, I don't deserve this. These are all core beliefs. They're deeper in us, right? We don't see them on a daily basis. We feel like we're positive, we feel like that we are fine. We don't see these core beliefs on a daily basis. But if we have negative automatic thoughts and we have these underlying rules or assumptions that we use to guide our lives, that means that the core beliefs are there and they are limiting us, they are unhelpful, right? So I explain this to you in context of an example that you might relate to, right? A distressing call comes in and you start thinking that I'm not going to be able to help this person, it's a very difficult case, I'm not going to be of help. The underlying rule or assumption is the fact that if I don't help this person, if this person is not smiling or is not sounding relaxed at the end of this, it means that I have not done a good job, right? And therefore we understand that our core belief, or the unhelpful thing that sort of makes us feel low, that makes us feel like we don't deserve, is the fact that I'm worthless or I'm useless, or uh, I'm worthy only if I have this, right? So the next part of the discussion is going to be identifying these negative thoughts, right? What can we call them? Identifying them, what can we do in order to change these negative thoughts, right? That's about what I have told you. So, quick recap. We spoke about thoughts, the importance of thoughts, the fact that we can feel better by changing the environment, by changing something about our physical health, by changing our behavior, but we're focusing on thoughts. Why? I explained that with a small story as well. And I said that the thoughts that we have are ours. Whether we have access to anything else, we always have access to our thoughts, right? Our thoughts are the last of our freedoms that we can work on. And therefore, we're doing that. At least we're attempting the process in today's session. So we listed these negative beliefs or thoughts into three things, right? The negative automatic thought, which immediately pops into our mind that we have access to, that we can change. The underlying rules or assumptions underlying to the negative thoughts, right? Inside, what are the rules that govern us? What are the rules that govern our lives, right? That if I do this, only then I must do this, I should do this. Very strict sort of words or rules that we live by, right? And the fact that we have that means we have internal core beliefs that are unhelpful, that are hurtful, right? Which we will touch upon in today's talk. So I'll ask Deeksha to take it forward from here, please.
Hi, is everyone able to
ஒன்னும்
see
செய்வேன் கேட்க
and
அவ்வளவுதான்
hear me?
என்ன பண்ணணும்?
சா பண்ணா ரீகனெக்ட்
Whoever's talking, can you please?
வரும்போது கனெக்ட்
Hello? Can you please mute your audio so that we can begin? It's causing a little bit of disturbance. All right. Thank you, Shreya, for setting such a good foundation for us to understand our negative thoughts. So I'm going to be walking everybody through some of the common negative thoughts that can happen and some of the ways in which they can manifest. Then we can go on to challenging and modifying these thought patterns before Shreya walks us through meditation again. So, first, let's talk about cognitive distortions. We've spoken about negative thoughts so far, and we've understood that negative thoughts can often come along with various other triggers, including the environment, physiology, your behavior, etc. And we've decided to focus on thoughts today. And even with thoughts, we've understood that there are many layers of thoughts. One of those layers end up being cognitive distortions. So what are Thank you. Okay, so what are cognitive distortions? So when a person is under stress or duress, your thinking often becomes rigid. Let me use the example that Shreya just used a couple of minutes ago for when you're getting a distressing call. When you're getting a distressing call and you hear a child being in distress, you're likely to feel very stressed out. And our automatic reaction to situations like that is to have rigid thoughts that say, I won't be able to help this child. I won't be able to do anything here because it's a difficult case. So, what cognitive distortions are exactly that rigidity, that the automatic reaction that we have to a stressful situation is that we have very rigid, unhelpful, and negative thinking patterns. And they cause us to both perceive ourselves and the world around us in a biased way. So if the first thought that comes to my mind is that I'm not going to be able to help this child and I can't do this case, it's likely that the thought is very rigid, it's unhelpful, and it's making me perceive myself as a failure, as being worthless, and it's also making me perceive the child who's seeking help as somebody I can't help. So in that way, I am perceiving both myself and the environment in a very biased manner. A very helpful way to understand cognitive distortions can be to look at it as a filter. So they're often like a filter that we're wearing every now and then. When you're not seeing the world through a cognitive distortion, you're looking at the world through your naked eye. I can see colors as they are, people look exactly as they are, I'm able to see reality as it is. But once a cognitive distortion comes in, or a negative thinking pattern comes in, then I will perceive the world through a filter. Maybe the filter is red in color, so that my entire world, including myself, looks red to me now. Or I'm wearing a filter that magnifies everything around me, so everything constantly looks much bigger than it is for me now. Or I'm wearing a filter that misshapes everything that's around me. So I might be actually looking at a ball, but it might look like a cylinder. So, in that way, when we're perceiving the world through cognitive distortions, we're perceiving the world through filters. We're not exactly seeing the world as it is, and it results in us looking at the world in a biased manner and looking at ourselves in a biased manner, which definitely comes in the way of how we respond to the situation and how we feel as well. Because of how rigid they are and how painful they often are, the kind of painful things these distortions say to us, it can make us feel painful emotions. I might, using the same example of the call that we've been talking about, I might feel worthless because the thought is telling me that I cannot help the child. I might feel like I'll lose my job. I might feel very helpless. I might also feel guilty. And those are very heavy emotions, and it can really get in the day. After that, you might feel very lethargic during the day. You might not be able to work properly. You might lose concentration. You might lose your energy. So, these cognitive distortions are not only rigid and unhelpful, but they also come with very painful emotions. Like Shreya just mentioned a little while ago, these oftentimes it is our one of the things that really affects us is our thoughts. They can come in and make things much harder than they already are, and in that way cognitive distortions actually really keep us from functioning in a healthy manner or functioning in an optimal manner. Is everybody able to understand and keep up with what I'm trying to say? If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Hello. It'd be really helpful if someone could maybe unmute and let me know if I'm going at the right pace, or if you'd like me, if there's something that you don't understand. I can't see the chat because I'm also presenting. So if someone could please unmute and let me know, that would be really, really helpful.
Diksha, I think we can continue.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so now that we have an idea of what cognitive distortions are, let's look at some of the examples and some of the different kinds of cognitive distortions that often come up for us. So psychologists have identified several cognitive distortions. The list on this PPT is not an exhaustive list. It's only the most common and most frequent cognitive distortions that we see. But there are definitely a couple more that exist. But these are the most important ones. Let's go over what these different types of cognitive distortions can look like. The first one is black and white thinking. I think we have spoken about black and white thinking in previous webinars before, so some of you might be familiar with what this looks like. But what black and white thinking essentially is that that I'm thinking in extremes. I either think that I'm going to do really well, or I think that I'm going to fail. Using the same example that we've been using so far in getting a distressing call from a child, a black and white kind of thinking can say that I am either going to completely flunk this, I'm going to not be able to help the child, I'm going to do badly, or the opposite can be that I'm going to do extremely well and I'm going to save this child from the situation. Both of these are extreme ways of thinking. We also often call this polarized thinking, if things don't go perfectly, then it means everything is wrong, that I am a failure. So if you're not able to help the child, if you're not hearing that the child is feeling better at the end of the call, you're likely to think that you are really bad at your job, and maybe even go far as to think that you might lose your job. So with black and white thinking, we're thinking in extremes. And if we're not able to achieve this extreme, if we're not able to make the child smile at the end of the call, then we are likely to perceive ourselves as failure and maybe even hate on ourselves about it. The next cognitive distortion that comes up very often is in jumping to conclusions. Let's take another example now. For instance, your boss has called you in for a meeting. You didn't see this coming. It was a very random meeting scheduled in the day. You don't know what they want to talk about. You don't know why they want to talk to you. But if the cognitive distortion of jumping to conclusion is coming up for me, then I might be quick to think that, oh my God, my boss is going to fire me, that I've done terribly and I've done a lot of mistakes, and so my boss is going to fire me. So with this example, you don't have any idea, you have nothing to support the fact that you've done a bad job. You have nothing to support the fact that your boss is going to fire you. But you are sort of jumping to that conclusion and saying that my boss wants to talk to me, it must mean that he's going to fire me. So, such kind of a cognitive distortion can make us feel really terrible about ourselves. The situation is just that our boss wants to talk to us, but because of this, because we're jumping to conclusions in our head, we're likely to feel really sad, dejected, nervous, anxious, and scared before you go into this meeting, which can definitely affect the way you exist in that meeting as well. Another cognitive distortion is called mental filtering. Let's take the same example that I've been using about your boss calling you in for a meeting. And let's say that your boss has a whole bunch of things that he thinks about you. He gives you a couple of positive feedback. He thinks you've done well with so many projects. You've, been very, very helpful. And on the other hand, he has a little bit of negative feedback as well and some criticism to look at what you can improve in your job, what you can do a little bit better. Now, if I was mental filtering, what I would do is to say that I would completely discount the positives. I would completely discount the fact that he thinks I did well with so many projects, but I'll only focus on the negatives. So I won't account for the positives at all. And I will again think that, oh my God, I've done my job so badly, I'm probably going to get fired. So if you see in that example, we're filtering out all of the positives and only focusing on the negatives. Another cognitive distortion can be mind reading, and this is something most of us tend to do. What we tend to do is to read somebody else's mind and try to understand what they're thinking or how they're feeling without any proof. So in the same example, I might be trying to read my boss's mind because of this positive and negative feedback, and try to say that, my boss must hate me because he thinks I'm doing my job really badly. So in that way, what you're doing is you're reading your boss's mind without having any proof as to what's actually going on in the situation. Another cognitive distortion can be labeling. This is also something we tend to do very often. For example, the very label of I'm a failure, or I'm the worst, or I can't do anything. These are very, very strong sort of words. So if something goes wrong, if maybe during this presentation I stutter a little too much or I forget something I was going to say, then I might label myself as a failure. I might label myself as someone who can never do presentations. And that in that way, I'm putting a negative label on myself, which can again make you feel very terrible later on, and can also ruin your day. Another cognitive distortion is catastrophizing. So what this cognitive distortion is also called magnifying. And to give you an example of what catastrophizing can look like, let's say that in this, there is let's go back to that example, the child, the distressing call from the child that you're getting. So if you are catastrophizing, when you're getting the call and you're hearing that it's a difficult case, you might assume that I won't be able to handle this case. I'm going to, and because I can't handle this case, my boss is going to scream at me and then he's going to fire me. So if you saw how that progressed, I'm assuming that I'm going to do badly in this. And then I'm quickly escalating it to saying that my boss is going to hate me and I'm going to get fired. Is there any proof in the situation to say that you're going to get fired? Not really. But you are kind of catastrophizing the situation, magnifying it and making it worse than it actually is. Is everybody able to understand what I'm saying and able to keep up with what I'm saying? If you'd like me to pause and go over something again, you can please let me know. Okay, so I guess I'll just continue. Another cognitive distortion is called overgeneralizing. So what you do when you're overgeneralizing is to say, let's say I did one presentation really badly in my life, or did two presentations really badly in my life. And because of that, I generalize it to the rest of my life and say that I can never do presentations. I'm terrible at presentations. The truth is that I might have done some very good presentations. I might have I might have even gotten a lot of compliments about some presentations that I've done. But when I overgeneralize, I only look at the one presentation that I did really badly and then make a absolute statement about it, saying that I can never do presentations. I'm terrible at them. So again, you're not really looking at reality and what's actually happening to you, but you're sticking on to the worst case scenario. Finally, shoulds and musts are another example of cognitive distortions. What that is sometimes we have these very strong, rigid ideas for ourselves. For instance, should that I can have is that I should wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning every day, make 3 meals for my family, and then go to work. So that's a very strong statement. And because you're saying I should do it, it has this finality to it, this very strong, like there's a lot of pressure on it. Now, let's say you're able to wake up at 6 a.m. On most days, make 3 meals, and go to your job. You might feel really exhausted, but and you might be very, very pressured, but you'd be okay because you managed to live up to that expectation of yourself. But what can happen if it goes wrong and one day you're not able to wake up at 6 because you're sick, and you're not able to, cook a meal for your family? Then you are likely to feel extremely guilty. And feel really bad about yourself, low. You could maybe even say feel worthless and helpless at that point. So when we have such strong shoulds and must statements, such high expectations for ourselves, it can be really reducing in our experience and can be really, really guilt provoking. So with all of these cognitive distortions, one thing is absolutely clear. It's the fact that we're not seeing the world as it actually is, but we're seeing the world through a filter that can really, really bog us down. I'm wondering if the audience here can give me a couple of examples of some of these cognitive distortions that they've seen in themselves.
Hi, ma'am.
Yeah.
That overgeneralization you told, no?
Yeah.
That experience I got it when I took a vehicle to go somewhere. Some distraction, some disturbance happened that time. So nowadays I'm not ready to take that one. Still that block is there. So that may happen like that. So I just try to avoid to take the vehicle. So
Yeah.
over generation, cognitive negative thoughts only, I don't know how to overcome that one.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a really good example. Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I got it, but I'm just sharing with you that
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. That is a really good example. Sometimes we can, because one situation went wrong, we can then feel very blocked, like you mentioned, like there's a block that's keeping you from moving forward. Through the course of this presentation, we'll also go over a few things that we can do to modify these patterns. They can be very rigid, very hard to break, but there are a few things that we can do, and we'll walk over that in a few minutes. Thank you so much for sharing again. Is there anyone else who'd like to give me examples of any of these cognitive distortions that they've seen in themselves?
Ma'am, shall I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is that magnifying that catastrophizing you
Mm.
told no,
Mm.
that is maximum good creator. I think more writers and other things. This
Mm.
type of may help them to create lot of stories. Whenever
Mm.
see any person think some other thing and make a story about them. These are all also your
Mm.
negative thoughts only, no?
Yeah.
No, so most of the families may happen in friends also. Whenever watching someone, we ourselves think like that. This person like this
Mm.
person like this. We assume ourselves, but
Mm.
that may be not a right one, no. So this is also happening in our daily life.
Yeah.
Some other person, it's happening, which I found and I experienced that.
Yeah.
So that's also I think.
Yeah, definitely. It happens a lot in our personal lives as well. And we can end up seeing people through this filter. The most difficult part is that we don't even realize that this filter is happening. And it can make us feel so terrible about ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing again. Would anyone else like to go? Shreya, if there are any comments, could you please let me know because I'm not able to really see the comments right now because of the
Yes,
presentation.
yes, Diksha, I'll let you know. Right now, there's nothing, but I'll tell you if there's something.
Okay. Okay. If nobody else is comfortable going, that's perfectly fine. We can move on in the presentation. So with this, we've looked at all of these different types of cognitive distortions that's come up. Let's spend a few minutes in talking about how to identify these cognitive distortions. Um, just now, some of you were able to identify some of the cognitive distortions that were coming up for yourselves. And, as we spoke about, it can be very difficult to identify because it's happened over such a long period of time. I've probably had these cognitive distortions since I was 10 to 15 years old, and it's become very strong and it's become very difficult to spot. For that reason, one very helpful thing to identify cognitive distortions can be to familiarize ourselves with the distortions, to get an idea of what are all the different kinds of cognitive distortions that can exist, and to understand them to the best of our abilities. So, if we're able to have an idea about what these cognitive distortions are, then we're more likely to recognize them and be able to identify them. But another very helpful step in identifying cognitive distortions can be to write down our thoughts, especially when we're feeling distressed, especially when we're feeling low or sad or angry. What we can do is write down our thoughts. If I'm thinking that I'm going to be a failure and I'm going to screw up this presentation right now, it can be helpful for me to write down that thought and then compare it to a list of cognitive distortions. When it is in our head, it can be very difficult for us to look at it objectively. So when we put it down on paper, we're able to maybe look at it a lot more objectively and have something concrete to compare to. So in that way, it can be easier to identify these cognitive distortions. This can be a difficult process. Like we've spoken about, these thoughts have stayed for a long period of time. But as you begin to do this, you will slowly get to master this, and it'll become easier and easier for you going forward. Um, there is a particular journaling exercise called the daily thought record, and this can be really helpful for us to understand our thoughts, identify these negative thoughts, and also challenge them. Okay, so what is a daily thought record? So it's a helpful tool. It can help us understand our thoughts. It can help us, journal our thoughts, record them, and then it can also help us alter them and challenge them. You can often look at the daily thought record as a journal that you're writing down every day, but a journal that you're writing for your thoughts. So it can help us change rigid patterns and make it more flexible. Like I mentioned, writing it down allows us to be more objective about our thoughts. And so when we're doing something like a daily thought record and we're journaling about our thoughts and writing it down, it can make us look at our thoughts more objectively and therefore make them more flexible as well. So when we use the DTR, we get into a habit of challenging our thoughts. So I objectively sit down and write all of my thoughts in the day. And I challenge them on a regular basis. So after a while, I might actually be able to challenge my negative thoughts without having to write them down. And I might be able to alter my thought patterns much more quickly. So this daily thought record is very, very helpful. In the next slide, I'll walk you through how to do the daily thought record. Okay, so this is an example of the daily thought record. As you can see, there are 5 columns here. In one, you're talking in the first column, you're journaling about the situation. So you're describing the situation very clearly and concisely. When it's concise, it can be easier for us to write it down, look at it objectively. But if you feel like elaborating, that's also fine. The second column is on the negative automatic thoughts. Just like Shreya mentioned, these are the automatic thoughts that come up. We don't even really give too much time to thinking about them. They happen quite automatically. And this is generally where the cognitive distortion lies. So the second column is really important, that we write down our negative automatic thoughts. And then we also rate the believability of this thought. So we're going to write about, we're also going to rate it between 0 to 100% and try to rate how strong this thought is. The third column is emotions. Here, we're rating the intensity of our emotions. We're first trying to note down what emotion that we're feeling and also rate it on a scale of 0 to 100 to rate how strong it is for us at that moment. And then the fourth column, we're talking about the alternative thoughts or the balanced thoughts. This is the column where we're challenging the thought. Once you have challenged the thought, we're also going to rate the believability of the alternative thought and rate how much stronger or how strong this alternative thought that we've come up with is. And finally, the last column and the fifth column is to journal about how you feel now. After we've gone through the first 4 columns, where we've written down the situation, the negative automatic thought, the emotion, and we've challenged the thought, then we come back to our emotion and try to rate how intense the emotion is right now. It's not likely that our emotion will completely disappear, but this exercise will make the intensity of the emotion lower. So then you can write down the emotion and maybe take a check as to what the intensity of the emotion is like after you've done the exercise. So here I have a couple of examples, and we're using and let me walk you through this so that you get a better idea. And after I've done that, you can unpause and maybe ask me questions if you have any doubts with this. Okay, so in the situation, what I'm doing is describing the situation clearly and concisely. So the situation is that I'm waiting for the presentation to start. So it is this presentation and I'm waiting for it to start. The negative automatic thoughts that I have right now are that I am going to screw this up. I'm going to completely screw this up. And the believability of the thought is 80%. That's to say it's very strong right now. I'm very scared that I'm going to screw this up. Another negative automatic thought that I'm having is that I've always messed up presentations. The thought is telling me that I've always messed up these presentations and I'm always going to mess them up. Could anyone here tell me what cognitive distortions they see here coming up for me? You can take a shot at it. It's
Whether anybody can say against others, against our presentations, or God or anyone may give any negative impact or like that may think no. That may come in our mind. We are already prepared and everything. We are ready to give, but some point somewhere, if anybody give any negative thoughts against our presentation, means what happens? How could we overcome that one?
yeah,
We should be ready in that like that. That
yeah,
persuasive,
definitely.
mm,
Definitely. We'll go through that as well in a few minutes. We'll actually go through it as we're talking about this. Okay, but if you look at these examples of I'm going to screw this up or I've always messed up presentations, in the second column, we can also point out the cognitive distortion that we're experiencing at that moment. When I say I'm going to screw this up, I'm likely jumping to conclusions. And when I say I've messed up the presentation, it's likely that I'm overgeneralizing. I've always messed up the presentation. It's likely that I'm overgeneralizing. So in the second column, it can be very helpful for us to also write down the kind of cognitive distortions that is coming up, or maybe just make a mental note of it to ourselves. And then in the third column, what we're doing is writing down the emotion. So the emotion that I'm feeling because of these, negative thoughts is anxiety. And the anxiety is at 90%, which is to say that it's very intense for me right now. Now, in the fourth column, and the most important column, now I'm now going to try to challenge these negative automatic thoughts. So over here, I'm saying that I'm jumping to conclusions right now. There is no evidence to say that I will screw this up. I've worked very hard for this presentation. So you are being very calm and composed. You're acknowledging the fact that cognitive distortion is coming up for you. And then you're also trying to say that there's no evidence to say that I've screwed up. I've worked very hard for this presentation. I've prepared. I've spent a lot of my time going over this. I've worked very hard. So it's not so likely that I'm going to screw this up. You're looking at the evidence around you. Similarly, in the second example of I've always messed up presentations, I'm acknowledging that I might be over generalizing. And I'm noting that I might have messed up a couple of presentations before. I might have done a presentation or two badly, but I've also done good presentations in my life. So it's definitely not true that I've always messed these presentations up. There are some I've done badly, but there are also some that I've done well. So if you look at it, if you look at what we're doing over here, we're looking at the actual reality. We're first noting the cognitive distortion that might be coming up. And after that, we're also trying to come back down to reality and say, what evidence do I have around me? The thought is telling me that I'm going to screw up, or the thought is telling me that I've always messed up presentations. But is that actually true? What evidence do I have in my life against that? And to write that down. Against that, you're also writing the believability of this alternative balance thought, which is more tied to reality, which is more tied to actual evidence in your life. So the believability of this thought, the alternative thoughts, when they're done this way, it's also likely to be pretty strong. So if you see here, I've put it as 70 and 80%, which means it's quite believable because I'm sticking down to reality. And in the fifth column, then I've written down what my level of anxiety is now. It was at 90% a few minutes ago. And after I wrote it down, it's come back down to 50. And it's likely that maybe some of my more physical signs of anxiety have reduced, and I feel a little bit more capable of going ahead with the presentation. So with this exercise, our anxiety is reducing. I think one of you just mentioned a couple of moments ago as to what happens when people are telling you that you're going to mess it up. I think we can go ahead with the same kind of evidence looking. We can look for evidence around us to say that this person might be telling me that, but there are a lot of people who've also told me that I do presentations well, that I've done presentations well, that I've also prepared, I've put in a lot of hard work, and maybe I know myself better than this other person knows me. So in that way, you are coming back down to reality. You're coming back down to what's actually around you. And then you are grounding yourself to reality instead of the distortion of your thought. Does that clear your question? I think Hema Malini. Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right then. So this is one way in which we can challenge our negative thoughts in doing the daily thought record and getting more used to doing it. Has everybody understood how the daily thought record works? If you have any questions on how to do this, please feel free to ask me now. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next slide if you don't have any questions.
I was actually thinking that it is a very nice slide that you've put up. And I just wanted to say that for anybody who's willing to start looking at their thoughts more closely, I think it's a brilliant step to start with. It's easy and very understandable. So I just wanted to add, if I may, that if you are listening in and you realize that your thoughts are negative and it would help to reframe them, it's a good idea to take a screenshot of this, I think, and start with it in your notebooks after.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can maybe stay at this slide for the next few minutes so that you can take screenshots or you can quickly write this down. It's a very helpful exercise, and it not only allows us to get more in touch with our negative thoughts, understand them and deconstruct them, and also help with our emotions. Over time, we get more and more used to doing this, and it becomes easier for us to do it. Please go ahead and take screenshots or write this down quickly, and we'll move on to a couple of other things that we can do apart from the daily thought record in changing and modifying thoughts, negative thoughts.
Ma'am, impactful thoughts heading. Can you show it again? I'll take the screenshot.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you. Can you repeat that?
That impactful thoughts heading is there, no?
One.
Negative thoughts.
Yeah.
There. The cognitive distraction heading is there, no?
Yeah. Is it this one?
No, this one is okay. This one I did. Next
Okay.
one.
Oh, next. This one?
No, next one.
This
one. Okay.
Oh. Okay, if everyone's noted this down as well, let's move on to the next. Some of the other things that we can do in responding to cognitive distortions can include, like the first one I mentioned in the daily thought record, where we examine the evidence. So here what we're doing is the thought might be telling us that you're going to screw this up, but you're coming back down and you're examining the evidence around you. Maybe a colleague of yours is telling you that you are going to screw up the presentation. That's not just coming from you, it's also coming from them. It's likely that the negative thought that comes as a reaction to that is even stronger. So what we can do instead of giving into the thought is to examine the evidence around us and to say that I have done some really good presentations. I have I might have screwed up sometimes. I might have done a bad presentation now and then, but I've also done really well. There are people who have told me that I've done really well, who have supported me. And that definitely does mean something as well. So giving you another example of the distressing call that maybe you're getting from the child and you feel like you can't help the child at all, it can be helpful to examine the evidence and say that I have done this before, I have helped a lot of children before, and I might not be able to help everyone, but what I can do is what I want to focus on. The fact that I can do this, I've done this before, and I'm very dedicated. I care for this child and I'm going to do my best. So in that way, you're coming back down to reality a little bit more, coming back down to the actual world around you and taking off the filter that you're wearing with the cognitive distortion. Another thing that we definitely need to do is to approach ourselves with more kindness and compassion. If you look at the thoughts that we've been talking about today, they're quite harsh. They're really harsh. In fact, if you're going to tell yourself that you're a failure or that you're going to screw this up, that you always do things badly, that you're worthless, etc., those are very harsh words to use against ourselves. Take a second right now and think as to whether you'd actually use that same kind of harsh language towards your friends or the people you care about and the people you love. It's more likely that when it comes to people around us, we approach them with kindness and compassion. We are not likely to say that they're failures. We're not likely to say that they're going to screw things up. Instead, we'll approach them with kindness and compassion. Instead, we might say that I know this is difficult for you. I know that you're scared about this presentation. You're feeling very anxious right now, but you've done this before and you've got this. Let's go and do this presentation, or let's go and help this child to the best of our capacity. So in those ways, you're approaching yourself through kindness and compassion instead of the harshness of these cognitive distortions. It can be helpful at these conjunctures to think about how you would respond to a friend instead. How would you respond to a friend instead of the way you're responding harshly to yourself? That can be a helpful way to get us to be more kindness and be more kind and compassionate. Another thing that we can do is in thinking in shades of gray instead of extremes. So with the same example that we've been using of getting a distressing call, or maybe even meeting a child in distress, we're likely to think of it in black and white and in extreme to say that I can only help this child if I remove them out of the situation completely, or if I don't, then I'm a failure. So in that way, we're thinking in very black and white terms. We're thinking in very polarized and in a harsh manner. So instead of that, we can come back down to something in between the black and white to say that this is a difficult case, yes, for sure. But I've handled these cases before. I know what I am capable of doing. Some of these things might be very hard for me, and I might not be able to completely remove the child out of the situation, but I can do my best. And I know that I've done well before. So in that way, I know that I've helped children before. I know that I've made a difference to people before. So in that way, we're going away from the extremes that we often look at these stressful situations through, and we're coming back down to the middle to say that this might be hard, but I have done this before and I'm going to help however I can to the best of my ability. Another thing that we can do is doing a cost-benefit analysis of the negative thoughts and emotions. So now what is a cost-benefit analysis? Let's say my negative thought right now with the presentation is that I'm a failure and I'm doing really badly. What is the cost of this negative thought? Because of this negative thought, I'm feeling low, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling breathless, I'm feeling like a failure. Maybe I'm even feeling choked and I don't feel like I can talk anymore. So this negative thought is coming with a lot of heavy consequences. So when we're feeling such negative thoughts that are likely to bog us down, we can stop for a moment and try to look at the benefit of this thought. Is it helping me in any way? Is it helping me get through this situation in any way? Is this negative thought worth all the distress that it's giving me? That is a good question that we can ask ourselves. And oftentimes, when we ask ourselves a question like that to understand the cost benefit analysis of the negative thought, we're likely to realize that either negative thought is not worth all of this distress, and I'm going to come back down to a thought that might be more helpful for me in this current situation. So that is a cost benefit analysis. Another thing we can do is using less emotionally loaded vocabulary. When I say less emotionally loaded vocabulary, I mean, when we are talking through these cognitive distortions, they generally tend to be very heavy. You're saying I'm worthless, you're saying I'm a failure, you're saying I can't help this child, you're saying I'm going to get fired, you're saying that I can't do my job properly. All of these are very emotionally loaded vocabulary. If you hear that kind of vocabulary from the people around you, if someone is telling you that you're a failure, or if someone is telling you that you can't do something properly, you're likely to feel very horrible because those are harsh words. Those are very emotionally laden words. So instead of using such emotionally laden words, you could say that instead of saying that I'm a failure, you could say that I'm scared to fail. I'm feeling anxious right now, and maybe I need to take a breather. Maybe I need to pause and look at my thoughts. So when you notice yourself using such heavy vocabulary like I'm a failure, I can't do anything, I'm worthless, it's helpful to remember that those are very emotionally laden words, and you might want to come back down and be a little kinder to yourself and use less emotionally loaded vocabulary to maybe say that you are afraid right now, you're afraid to fail, but that and that you might need to take a break and understand what's happening with your thoughts instead, and change the kind of vocabulary that you're using for your thoughts. Use less emotionally loaded vocabulary. Another helpful thing that we can do is to reattribute blame. Okay, let me give you an example for this. Let's say that I actually did quite, let's say I wasn't able to save a child. Now, what we're likely to do in a situation like that is to completely blame ourselves, to say that it was my responsibility to take care of the child. I didn't do well. I'm a failure. In that way, you're completely putting the blame on yourself. So instead of completely putting a blame on ourselves, we can pause for a second and look at the situation. Try to evaluate all of the different things that contributed to this, to not being able to help this child. I've heard a lot of you mention before that you need government support, you need aid from all of these different agencies and organizations. And it's likely that in a situation where you're not able to help the child, these other organizations also have a a part to play in it. Maybe the police were not able to help in time. Maybe you were just not able to find help at that point in time. Maybe it is because of COVID and the kind of restrictions that have come with COVID. Maybe it's also that you don't have as many resources to handle such a difficult case. So when we're looking at it that way, we're reattributing the blame. We're giving different parts of the blame to different aspects that could have contributed to the situation going bad, instead of putting it all on ourselves. When we're putting it on all on ourselves, we're being unrealistic, and we're unnecessarily in ways causing more harm to ourselves, making the situation even harder for us to deal with. So instead of that, we can try to come back a little bit more and question as to what are the different things that could have played a part in the situation coming about. Maybe one could have been that I didn't work as hard as I should have, but there can be so many other reasons as to why. And when we distribute the blame, then it becomes less emotionally laden. If I was feeling very guilty and worthless before, I'm likely to feel a bit more hopeful that I can help other people, and a bit more hopeful that it wasn't all my fault. Is everybody able to keep up with me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. All right. Another thing that we can then do is to, yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
At a point,
Yeah.
for us, it's also important to balance between reattributing blame and complacency.
Right.
Because at times, what you said about stepping back and reviewing, if we could have done certain better, I think conscious step we would need to keep doing as Childline.
Yeah.
Uh, because of multiple players being there, I think the first step would to review what are the things we could do better, and then patch it with responsibility or external factors that have really contributed to a situation not being handled properly.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. When we're talking about reattributing blame, we're not trying to completely take all onus of responsibility away from ourselves. We are acknowledging that, but we're also acknowledging the other things that might have caused the disturbance or caused us to feel that distress. That's what we're doing when we're reattributing blame. It's definitely a good point that where we have to also acknowledge what we can maybe do better and maybe where we went wrong. Yeah. Okay, so another thing that we can do is to decatastrophize. We talked about catastrophizing, where we magnify a situation to much worse than what it is. So in order to sort of handle this catastrophizing, we can come back a little bit down to decatastrophizing. And in this, some of the questions that we can ask ourselves to decatastrophize is first to understand what the situation is that triggered it, what is happening around you, and what are the thoughts that are coming up for you. So you're identifying the thoughts that are coming up for you, and maybe it is the same presentation that I've been talking about. Maybe it is that I'm going to completely screw up the presentation. Maybe I'm going to get fired. Now, how do I decatastrophize? I first identify what's happening here, and then I look at what is the worst that could happen. What is the worst case scenario if I fail this presentation, or if I screw up this presentation? If we look at that, maybe the worst case scenario is that I get screamed at, I get fired. I have so many worst case scenarios that come up in my head. I might even be saying that I'll never get a job again. So that we can write down and say, okay, this is the worst case scenario in my head. But what is most likely to happen is the next question that we can ask ourselves. When we catastrophize, again, we are magnifying the situation to be much worse than it is. So when we're asking the question of what's most likely to happen, we're coming back down a little bit. Now, if I were to answer that question in terms of the presentation, what's most likely to happen is that I might be, my boss might be angry with me for a little while. Maybe they'd ask me to work harder on presentations. Maybe they might reduce the number of presentations that they're giving me, etc. Or maybe I might just feel embarrassed. So in reality, when we're coming back down to what's most likely to happen, Then we're coming back down from the worst case scenario. The catastrophizing takes us to the worst case scenario. And with this question, we're coming back down a little bit to what's actually likely to happen. So that is how we decatastrophize. Another thing that we can do is to do personal contracts with us. Let's say, for example, we have noticed some cognitive distortions that come up most often for us. Let's say maybe I tend to jump to conclusions very often. Maybe I tend to think in black and white terms very often. Now, when I'm doing a personal contract with myself, I am going to sort of make a sort of pledge to myself and say that, hey, the overgeneralization and maybe the jumping to worst case scenarios is something that I do most often. And if I do this, I need to have a sort of contingency plan to get to. So if I'm in a stressful situation, I'm feeling negative towards myself, I'm feeling low, then I can pause and ask myself a couple of questions. I can ask myself what evidence I have to support it. I can ask, maybe even check with a couple of my teammates or a couple of my friends to see how they see the situation. Maybe they'll be able to help you from not jumping to conclusions, but coming back down a little bit towards actually around you, even if you're not able to see it. So in personal contracting, you're noting this down, noting what comes up most for you down, and you're setting a contract with yourself. So saying that if there are stressful situations, then I'm going to ask these couple of questions to myself. I'm going to try to look at the evidence more, and maybe I'm even going to reach out to my friends to help me in this process. So personal contracts can be very helpful in making sure that we stick to modifying our negative thinking patterns. Another thing that we can do is to modify the shoulds and the musts. Like I mentioned, these shoulds and musts can be very, extreme statements, very strong statements, very harsh statements. And when we're even using that vocabulary, we're very used to using, you should do this or I must do this kind of words. It can be helpful for us to try not to do that. Instead, we could say that I would like to wake up at 6 a.m. And make food for my family, but if I can't, that's also fine. So we're removing shoulds and musts from our language. And if we're not able to completely remove them, at least we're paying more attention to them. And when they come up, we're changing how we approach that situation. If I hear myself say, I should make lunch for 5 people today, I can come back down and say, I would like to make lunch for 5 people today, but if I can't, that's also all right. I'm going to be mindful of what I can and cannot do. So that's essentially how we modify shoulds and musts. Now, we've gone over all of these different ways by which we can challenge and modify thinking patterns. But like we mentioned before, it can be a difficult thing to do. Seeking therapy from a trained professional can make this process much easier. And there might still be negative thoughts that we might not be able to pick up on ourselves. We might need a trained therapist to pick up on them. And trained therapists also have other tactics that they can use, other tools that they can use in therapy to help modify these persistently inflexible thought patterns. So seeking help from a therapist can also be really helpful in modifying these thought patterns, apart from everything that we've spoken about. Does anyone have any questions regarding all of these, modification tactics that we've spoken about so far?
Ma'am, the negative thoughts, mind reasons and labeling will come under the personal contracting in that we have the same note.
I'm not able to hear you properly. It's very low.
You are not able to hear me. Hello, can you
Yeah,
hear?
yeah, I can hear.
No, that negative thoughts you have given some points. No, that time cognitive, that one in
Yeah.
mind reading and labeling will comes under in this remedy for that personal contracting that it may added up.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
Uh, that is mind reading the some points types of cognitive distance you have given. No, in
Mhm.
that mind reading and labeling,
Yeah.
those 2 points will comes under this personal contracting.
Oh, no, no.
They are modifying shoots and must you have given. No, in that about topic personal contracting is there. No, we have to self analyze ourselves and our other things.
Yeah.
That labeling and mind reading we should rectify this method. I'm
Yeah,
asking.
we can actually use personal contracting method to modify any of the negative thoughts. We can definitely use it for labeling, and we can definitely use it for shoulds and musts. Uh,
Okay.
but we can
Mind
also use
reading.
it for other negative thoughts. So I can
Okay,
use
madam.
it for overgeneralization. I can use it for black and white thinking. However, it is what the core of personal contracting is to set an idea for yourself to say that if I'm stressed out, I'm likely that I'll maybe start labeling, maybe I'll start having very strong shoulds and must statements. So I want to have a contingency plan in mind to ask myself a couple of questions to try to get more evidence from my reality and maybe even check in with people around me if I'm not able.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions, or we can move forward and Shreya will walk us through some meditation exercise. Okay, I guess we'll move forward. Shreya, can you take over?
Yes. Thank you so much. I know that we're running a few minutes late. So I will shorten the meditation passage, and we can break in 5 minutes. I hope that's okay. Um, what I need you to do for this part of it is that I need you to just relax. I need you to probably sit back and close your eyes if you're comfortable to do that. The intention behind this task is just to give you a small exercise that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed on days where you have a lot of work and you're trying to pull through, you're trying to give yourself whatever energy that you can to pull through such a day. So we'll take about 5 minutes. It won't be very long. And like I said, what I need you to do is take a minute to close your eyes. And if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, then you can just look at something and soften your gaze. For this part, especially, I like everybody to be on mute because it can be very disturbing for everybody else. So please make sure that you are on mute. Um, so take a minute to close your eyes, soften your gaze, look at something if you're not comfortable closing your eyes. Now think of yourself on a tough day where you're trying to give care to a child, right? On the phone or in person, but this is a real caregiving situation. So close your eyes and imagine that day, where in that day, a day that is tough, a day where you're expected to give care to a child. Right? First of all, get in touch with the stress and difficulty of caregiving. It's hard, it's painful, you feel tired. So, on this tough day, when you're trying to give all the care that you can, feel all of the feelings that you feel, even the ones that you think you should not be having, like anger or frustration, Everything that you would typically feel on a day like this, allow yourself to experience all of that and know and tell yourself that what I'm doing is tough. I'm bound to experience these emotions. I'm going to say some warm words. I know we expect ourselves to be like superhumans, but after all, we are humans. Everyone is on their own life journey. And I am not responsible for this child suffering. I'm not responsible for this person suffering. I cannot take away all their pain, even though I might really wish to. Moments like these are difficult to bear. But I will try to help if I can. Let that sink in. Now notice your breathing, your in breath as you breathe in. Notice how the breath nourishes you. It gives you oxygen. Notice how your breath gives you life. As you breathe in compassion and kindness to yourself. Imagine that you're breathing in compassion and kindness to yourself. Take a deep breath and imagine a white or a golden light healing you with each breath. As you breathe in, imagine that you're breathing in the healing golden light. As you breathe in care and concern for yourself as a caregiver. Give yourself what you need. Breathe in again. Breathe in strength, courage, peace. Breathe in and know that you're breathing in for yourself. Now, focus on the person you're caregiving for. Recall the person in your mind. Recall what they are going through. And focus on the out breath. Focus on the exhaling here. As you breathe out, breathe compassion. Breathe out compassion for the other person, their difficulty. As you breathe out that white and golden healing light onto them. Use the breath to metaphorically send in your good wishes for them. Breathe out acceptance, peace, and kindness. Breathe out what you think they need. Breathe it out onto them. Now bring both together. Breathe in for yourself and breathe out for the other. Breathe in for me. Breathe out for you. One for me and one for you. The source of this compassion is unlimited. It's a vast, boundless emotion. This compassion is more than enough for you and the other person you're caring for. As I said when we began, everyone is on their own life journey. I am not responsible for this person's suffering. I cannot take away all the pain this person is feeling, even though I might really want to. Moments like these are difficult to bear, but I will try to help if I can. When you're ready, you can gently open your eyes, soften your gaze, and just hold that peace, hold that calm that's probably been with you in the last couple of minutes. Know that as you are caregiving for somebody else, you yourself deserve the compassion, you yourself deserve the care that goes with doing something like that. So, in moments where you are overwhelmed, remember to breathe in for yourself a long, deep breath filled with compassion and the white, golden, healing light. And remember, as you breathe out, you can breathe out kindness, compassion, and that white, golden light, the healing light, onto the person you're giving care to. Right? Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been great to take you through this, and I do hope that this is an opportunity for you to look more closely into how you're taking care of yourself and into how you can manage and modify unhelpful thought patterns.
Okay, thank you, Diksha and Sriya. I think I'll invite Surya for the concluding remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Nilesh. So it was a wonderful exercise we had, the meditation, which make us calm and feel relaxed. Thanks for that exercise. And today we learned many things about how our thought is important to us. Many of us know what we are thinking and how the things are going on, but sometimes we forget to think how I'm thinking, whether it is helpful or do I need to change in my thought process and all. But today it was clearly given us what is the thought and how it could be modified in a way, and what are the some cognitive distortion which affects our thoughts being helpful manner. So also you have given us ABC method mode, through which the thought is actually taking us through a leading process and all. So it was wonderful session overall we had, and some of the responding mechanisms that have been shared with us, some of the techniques how we can cope up with our unhelpful thought and are very useful. And normally we read some quotes now, the actions are only 10%, the remaining 90% are how we are reacting towards that. So those reactions are formed on based on our thoughts only. So with this, we could at least the daily thought taking activity you have introduced to us. Let us start experimenting. Let us start noting down in our own daily diary what are the thoughts that I'm having today, and let's do that exercise from today onwards. So thanks for that. And we had a regional head with us, Chitra ma'am, who could spend her time with us today. Thank you for her presence. And ma'am, would you like to say something?
I think it was a very good session because it helped us take a step back, introspect, and the daily tracker is certainly a useful tool, not only for our Childline partners but also for the Childline India Foundation team. So it's been very insightful. Thank you very much, Deepshika and Shreya, both of you, for this interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for your words. Now I may call upon Pratik to give vote of thanks officially.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Pratik.
Yeah, I want to thank Diksha ma'am and Shriya ma'am for this wonderful session. I also want to thank Chitrakala ma'am for being a part of this session. And I also want to thank all the participants who have participated in this session. I also want to extend a great thanks to Hadeen ma'am for organizing this session for us. And thank you everyone who participating in it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Nirish and Pratik.
Yeah, thank you. Chitra ma'am, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I think we'll close the call now.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.